Hello and welcome. The webinar is now beginning and we will start with a word from Chantal Stark-Nadeau. Bonjour et bienvenue. C'est maintenant le début du webinaire. Commençons par un mot de Chantal Stark-Nadeau.
Well, good morning. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm Chantal Stark-Nadeau, Executive Director of Destination Canada's Business Events team. And I would like to thank you for coming together this morning for what we hope will be an engaging dialogue on key factors and emerging trends influencing the buying cycle and return of business events travel. Je m'appelle Chantal Stark-Nadeau et je suis la directrice exécutive de l'équipe des événements d'affaires de Destination Canada. Je vous remercie d'être des nôtres ce matin pour ce que sera, je l'espère, une discussion des plus intéressantes sur les facteurs principaux et les tendances émergentes qui influencent le cycle d'achat et la reprise des voyages pour les événements d'affaires. Le webinaire se déroulera en majorité en anglais, mais nous prendrons des notes qui seront traduites et disponibles ensuite. So this webinar is being hosted by Destination Canada's Business Events team. And this team is charged with growing Canada's share of international business events by promoting the country's unique meeting, convention, and incentive event possibilities. And as the destination marketing and research organization for Canada, we have a very unique role to play in mitigating the impact to our visitor economy through our response and proactive recovery planning as we navigate the uncharted territory of this global pandemic. Our role within Destination Canada is to act as a strategic advisor to Canada's business event partners, filling the gap of business intelligence specific to this segment of tourism as we move through our coordinated three-phase approach of response, recovery, and resilience. Currently, we're in the response phase, where we are collecting and distributing data and analysis that can help our partners make informed decisions, paving the way for eventual return of business events travel. And all of this will help inform our recovery phase, where we will adapt our plan for a resilient visitor economy, including reimagining how Destination Canada can leverage our economic sectors and our strengths to support our business event partners across all market segments. Eventually, we will move to our resilience phase, where a very thoughtful, community-based approach to tourism will lift up culture, art, community confidence and pride, and ultimately, innovation. Nous sommes maintenant à la phase de la réponse. Nous recueillons et diffusons des données et des analyses pour aider les partenaires à prendre des décisions éclairées afin d'ouvrir la voie à une future reprise des voyages pour des événements d'affaires. Ce travail servira de fondement à la phase de la reprise où nous adapterons notre plan pour assurer la résilience de l'économie touristique. Nous devons aussi notamment repenser la façon dont Destination Canada peut tirer profit des forces économiques du Canada pour soutenir ses partenaires des événements d'affaires dans l'ensemble des segments du marché cible. Enfin, nous arriverons à la phase de la résilience, où une approche touristique réfléchie et fondée sur la communauté stimulera la culture, les arts, la fierté et la confiance des collectivités et à bout, l'innovation. So a key part of the response phase was to conduct industry focus groups. We are so excited to harness the power of our industry today by bringing together a diverse group of planners and decision makers to continue the conversation and share their insights into the path forward for international business events. I appreciate your presence this morning, and I know we all look forward to hearing and learning from our panelists. So moderating today is Jennifer Adesol, our Director of Sales for Destination Canada's Business Events. La discussion aujourd'hui sera animée par Jennifer Adesol, la directrice des ventes au sein de l'équipe des événements d'affaires à Destination Canada. So Jen, will you walk us through the focus group project and what we hope to accomplish with today's dialogue? Merci.
Thank you, Chantal, and good morning, everyone. I echo Chantal's comments that we are really pleased to share this space and this important discussion with you all this morning. Last month, Destination Canada conducted a series of virtual focus groups to seek insights and the opinions of 44 international business event organizers, planners, and C-suite decision makers representing the United States, the United Kingdom, and Mexico in the incentive, corporate, and association markets, with the goal of understanding the key factors and emerging trends influencing the buying cycle and the eventual return of business events travel. This full report is available in French and English on our website, and we'll also be sending this at the conclusion of today's webinar.
So, le rapport est disponible en français et en anglais sur notre site web. Nous l'enverrons également aux participants à la fin du webinaire. Mais si vous aviez des questions durant la discussion, veuillez nous le poser dans la fenêtre de clavardage et si le temps nous le permet, nous y répondrons à la fin de la discussion. Merci.
Our goal for today's discussion is to dig a little deeper into some of the focus group findings. Throughout our discussion, please send any questions you may have via the chat box. And if we have time at the end, we'll answer these questions. Leading the discussion today is myself, Jennifer Addersall, and my colleague, Chantal Sturp-Nadeau. Joining us to help us dig a little bit deeper today is our panelists, Andrew Winterburn, who's the Director of Advantage Meetings and Events, part of the Advantage Travel Group, Libby Horn, Manager of Customer Programs and Events with JJ Haynes, Kate Banfield, Vice President of Event Solution Design and Strategy with BCD Meetings and Events, Roberta A. Kravitz, the Executive Director for the International Society for Magnetic Resonance in Medicine, Thomas Reiser, the Executive Director of the International Society on Thrombosis and Hemostasis, Paulo Oliveira, the Proposal Development Manager for BTC Americas, and finally, Bo Ballin, the Commercial Leader at CWT Meetings and Events. Our sincere thanks to each of you for investing this additional time with us, sharing your collective knowledge, and helping us shape the way forward for a strong recovery of Canadian business events. We all know hosting business events is not only a catalyst for economic growth, but in the era of COVID-19, it is a catalyst for economic recovery. If everyone is ready, I'd like to jump in to our first question. Thomas, if we could start with you. Looking at the immediate future in 2020 events, how has your meeting or event plans been affected by COVID-19 in the immediate term? And what would you say is the toughest challenge you're faced with right now? Thomas? Maybe we'll start with Libby.
So until we get a better understanding of what people feel comfortable doing across all our categories of attendees, my members or our exhibitors, what they're allowed to do, what they feel comfortable doing. I mean, that's probably our biggest hindrance. And then obviously the CDC rulings and what's going to be allowed as far as group size. And then of course, travel restrictions, if there are any, international travel restrictions.
And have you had to postpone or cancel any of your Canadian meetings so far for 2020?
We didn't have any scheduled for 2020. We do have for early 21. So that's what we're kind of, checking the border, seeing what's happening there, because all of our attendees would be American.
Right. And Andrew, what are your thoughts? How's this affected you from the UK?
The UK, most agencies, including ourselves in terms of Advantage Meetings and Events, have pretty much ridden off 2020, but where the expectation is that there'll be no events taking place this year, really, with the exception of one or two smaller events. But people, people do want to do business, they do want to run events, but it's very much around, obviously, the government guidelines. And the big challenge that we're all facing at the moment is very much around the uncertainty. The landscape is continuously changing. So I think everybody, on this call and everybody around the world is really wanting that clarity to be able to make business decisions and move things forward.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen a change in your international bookings as well for 2020, 2021?
2020, from as soon as COVID was announced in terms of the pandemic, anything international and European just stopped completely. And, we're starting to see a little bit coming back into Europe towards the end of this year, depending on the countries. Longer haul is we're starting to see that coming back into Q2, Q3 next year, really. So, yeah.
So touching on that, Bo, how is the impact of the last half of 2020 of the pause of global events? How's it affected you, specifically regarding events that are in Canada? Oh, you're still on mute, Bo.
Perfect. Yeah. So in terms of events that are in Canada, the primary thing that our clients are looking for is guidance from World Health Organization in terms of visa requirements. So they're looking to see, when they come into Canada, will they face quarantine? When will border restrictions be removed? We've had a number of events that have been postponed, and so they're just looking for clear guidance from either World Health Organization or the CDC.
Great. And Tom, you're back. So I'm going to jump back to you for the first question because I'd love to hear from you. What is the toughest challenge that you're faced with right now?
Hi, Jennifer. Toughest challenge right now is really pivoting from a face-to-face meeting to a virtual congress, both logistically, but also financially.
And have you had to change any of your international bookings that were already booked for the future?
Not yet.
Okay. Great. Well, let's talk about emerging trends. So to adapt to COVID-19, let's discuss some emerging trends that you're observing in your planning, booking, managing, or conducting events within Canada. So according to the recent survey with IRF COVID-19, disruption in the incentive travel, meetings and events industry, the Adaptation and Recovery Survey, almost 57% of would-be travelers reported feeling either very excited and grateful at the prospect of returning to business events travel. Specifically, people are beginning to anticipate and crave travel with a focus on new experiences and safe destinations within driving distance or that involve shorter flights. Kate, would you say that this would be your experience as well?
Yeah, I certainly would. I certainly think most of our customers we talk to are certainly craving that light at the end of the tunnel, and they are looking forward to getting back to resuming their incentive travel plans that they've had to cancel or postpone. Certainly shorter haul flights have become something that have been very appealing to a lot of our customers. Some of our customers that were doing programs overseas, whether that be in Europe or Africa or Australia, are actually pulling those programs back. And then also some of our folks that were doing programs in the US in some of the larger spaces in Orlando and some of the more usual larger Vegas destinations have actually pivoted and now are looking at Toronto for those for 2021, having canceled them this year. So a little bit of a silver lining there.
And from the incentive standpoint, what types of experiences do you see would be a great fit for your incentive groups relating specifically to Canada? Would it be our wide open spaces, the safety component? What would you say?
I think it's there's a bunch of different things. So I certainly think the wide open spaces. You know, I'm from Newfoundland myself. I work in Chicago now. I totally appreciate the wide open spaces that, you know, are back at home, but certainly that all of Canada has to offer. I think it's actually quite appealing, and it's really interesting to see customers actually talk about that. And it's actually something that they're rethinking, trying to find those unique, compelling destinations that are going to create those bucket list experiences. But where can they do that? Canada has so much to offer coast to coast. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, people are considering Canada in a different way right now, how Canada has reacted to COVID, how they've managed through the pandemic, just on a global stage, how Canada has seemed to react to it too, I think has all been very positive. So I think that there's some good momentum there.
And that echoed across all of the focus groups that we had that you all sat in on. The general consensus was there's a global perception of Canada right now, and it's quite positive in terms of how we've handled things. So thanks for sharing that. Paula, would you say the same for Mexico?
Yes, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. We as Mexican and Latin American region are paying attention on Asia Pacific and European behaviors. I think that particularly the Mexican corporate industries as pharma, insurance, financial, and retail are still withstanding to travel. We do firstly with local incentives, or not even incentives, just events within driving distance, but still uncertainly. And definitely safest destinations will be selected by travelers. And they will be feel confident to have accommodation at recognized and brand hotels. And for example, it's important to say and to mention that companies do not have certain to return to the offices. Right now here in Mexico, the situation probably end of this year or beginning of next one. So we know that events will be the last things to return. And so regarding the incentives market, we have noticed that probably will return until mid-21. We have confirmed events to Boston and another one to Vancouver that has been moved. So we think as well that the good point we can see on Canada as international incentive destination compared with another abroad selections are that people will feel confident to travel not too long distances before travel maybe to Europe, right?
And would you say Canada would be considered a long haul or a short haul destination from Mexico?
Yeah, well, Canada, I think that is one of the first international selections that we as Mexicans, and I think as Latin Americans, we can choose. I think that people and clients feel comfortable with destinations like Canada.
Great. So sticking with incentives, Kate, how has your organization recognized and rewarded your top achievers, given group travel awards were off the table this year?
Yeah, this is where a lot of us have, certainly become really creative, and we're really lifting and shifting here. We are definitely leaning on our gifting partners. Those luxury online gifting experiences have become quite popular as an alternative to travel, but not a generic experience, a truly customized experience, branded experience online, and including those luxury brands that are going to appeal to those and sales folks that traditionally would have been on that trip. I would also say that we have explored a lot of other options with customers. They're looking at doing things like virtual concerts if they're not doing gifting, or they're doing that in conjunction with gifting. We're doing virtual awards evenings, virtual galas, virtual, food and beverage, bespoke food and beverage, working in association with some local restaurants and local food delivery services that we can accommodate across kind of a domestic and local base. So it's actually been really fun in a way to kind of help create that. And I think as events continue to move back to a hybrid and hopefully face-to-face place, some of these best practices and ideas from a luxury gifting perspective will continue forward through when folks come back face-to-face as well. So it's actually been really kind of interesting pulling it all together.
And are they quite receptive to the virtual galas, the virtual concerts?
I think as much as they can be. I think everyone's preference would be face-to-face, that we all talk about it. It's the elephant in the room. I think everyone's doing the best they can with a tough situation globally. I think everyone recognized that now's the time to pause, but I think everyone also is they're taking this opportunity to shine a light back on their event strategy and shine a light back on what's actually really important to their guests and their attendees. And they're taking some time to reevaluate what's important and what those business objectives are. So while we're taking this pause, and while it is no good for anyone, let's be honest, hopefully when we come out of this, there's going to be some more intention and more focus. And I think incentive travel is going to be one of those areas where that intention and focus really comes back in a balance.
Great. And Paula, would you have another perspective, or do you echo those comments as well?
Yeah, actually, we are pushing up clients on confirmed events, moving contracts without penalties to 21, and keeping as long as we could the budget conditions on the events that we confirmed this year. And now we are involved setting up virtual options to clients to keep contents for participants. And hopefully incentives needs to be face-to-face, and we think and we feel confident that clients, once this happens, will get returned to have as usual, and as we have the incentives programs, in this case for corporate clients. So for a while, yeah, we are creating and developing virtual contents, but it's good as well to give to clients different kind of options.
Right. Thanks, Paolo. And jumping over to you, Roberta. We know the challenges conference organizers face due to current physical distancing requirements. Can you describe some ways that your association planning process or cycle is changing? Through our focus groups, which you and Tom were part of the association group, we were talking about how booking windows are shrinking from 3 to 5 years down to 2 years to mitigate risk. Do you see this as the case for your association?
Well, at this point, I don't anticipate our booking window shrinking for the annual meeting from the current 5 to 6 years, given the size of our meeting, which is anywhere from 6,000 to 7,500 registrants and exhibitor personnel, and its length, which is a 6-day meeting now, just came down from a 7-day meeting. I could only see it happening if we were not in a position of competing for space in suitable convention centers globally. So for example, I anticipate our largest event, our annual meeting, will continue to meet face-to-face in the future. I think it's too important to medical research and specifically to the development of MR technology. But I do believe we're going to see some changes in how our registrants meet. And there could be some opportunities where we could use 2 convention centers, perhaps, for example, one in Canada and one in Singapore, and link them, running a meeting from 2 destinations in order to better serve the audience, which would address sustainability issues connected with travel, and yet provide the face-to-face networking opportunities that are desired by the community I work in. This, of course, could keep that booking window still at 5 to 6 years for our annual, given the increased need for space and time.
Well, that's quite interesting if this is, you know, the path that you foresee yourself going, or the association going, because you've now increased the planning cycle and the booking cycle, looking at 2 separate sites, 2 separate site selection process, 2 conference venues, contracts and room blocks, etc. So, yeah. And Tom, I see you nodding. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
A bit the same as Roberta. On our end, we're currently slowing down things a little bit to kind of understand how things are evolving. But other than that, we have the same issues. It's very competitive for larger meetings.
Right.
Well, and I think too that one of the things that we'll be doing is that we're going to start out with this idea, or at least flirting with this idea of connecting 2 sites with a workshop, which is anywhere from 1 to 300 people, which will give us a better idea. We would never start out with the annual meeting on that, because it is such a large meeting, and that wouldn't be feasible nor sustainable without some homework done. And the homework is going to start with the workshops. But it does speak to the need for cities to be flexible and to be willing to work with us as we all grapple with these issues of travel suspension, travel restrictions, sustainability issues, that sort of thing.
So that's a great segue into the delegate journey. Let's talk, Andrew. How about you share with us from our previous focus groups, that is the establishment of consumer trust throughout the delegate journey is extremely important to group travel, and especially to Canada as well. In your estimation, how do we, Destination Canada, as well as our Canadian partners, help create that trust in travel for your delegates?
Yeah, it's a really good question, this, and I think it's all about building confidence and building trust. But I think one of the important things that needs to come across through this is consistency of communication as well. I think there's a lot of, different experiences, different people putting different messages out there, whether it's hotels, whether it's airlines, whether it's DMCs, different destinations. So a consistent message across all the touch points, whether that's the airlines, hotels, convention centers, restaurants and bars, in terms of the way that you're managing, COVID situations and the guidelines that you're working to. So, if I'm talking to a client in the UK or in Europe or wherever our clients will be, they've got the confidence of knowing whatever they're doing, wherever we're going, it's one message, and it's very clear, and it's very easy to understand as well, and not being fragmented.
Right.
And I think, of course, crisis management planning, and I don't want to call it a crisis in some ways, but people need to know and be confident that when we're bringing an event to a particular destination, that they're in a safe pair of hands. So what contingency planning have you got in the destination? If that situation does arise, how will that be managed? And what infrastructure is in the destination, in the city, in the hotel, or the venues that we're using, to be able to support that as well, I think is another important part around that as well.
And that was the same sentiment that we heard through all 5 focus groups as well that we had a couple weeks ago, is a clear, concise, curated message, where you don't have to, or planners or such as yourselves don't have to go through each individual website to try and find the information that you need. You want one spot where it's curated, and have a destination as the conduit to have that info.
Yeah, very much. I think people looking for a competitive advantage in this at the moment a little bit, and I don't think it's the right way to go. I think getting a consistent message and making it clear and easy to understand from an external customer's point of view, bringing customers and clients to a destination, you can make that really clear, really simple and consistent across everything you're doing. Just makes it much easier to do business with you. Right.
Thanks, Andrew. And Bo, would you have a different perspective?
I would offer some of the similar perspectives. I mean, I think there's two variables that we're looking at. One is corporate policy versus sort of the attendee confidence, right? And so those are the two things that we're looking at. I would agree that it's clarity of expectations, but it's about the attendee experience. I think that planners and organizations are trying to determine, what does my meeting look like? What does my event look like? And can I understand what that experience is going to be like for the attendee? And does it make sense to have my event in context of whatever the current restrictions might be and what the attendee might feel like in the environment of a live meeting? The other thing that I would double down on is, again, the access and proximity to medical support on site. That's becoming incredibly important. And then also understanding just what does return to home look like if there was a second wave of shelter at home? How do people exit the destination, and how quickly can they move, and what are they faced upon return? And the other component is really around, I think organizations and planners are looking for flexibility in contracts. With the above stated, knowing that there isn't exactly clarity and expectations, that there are many unknowns, they're just looking for that added flexibility around potential cancellation policy.
Right, and I see a lot of head nodding right now with the panel as well. So now we're hearing, vaccine, the development of a vaccine could be a potential barrier to travel. Now, Thomas, in addition to, other than the vaccine, what would you say is the biggest travel barrier within your organization currently?
For us as an international organization, it's certainly travel distance. I think it's easily understandable that nobody's particularly excited about being 8-12 hours on a plane. So that's going to be a huge issue. And I'm afraid, particularly for larger international meetings, we're going to come back the latest in this entire situation.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, would you say the same from the UK?
Yeah, I think it's about confidence, which we touched on earlier, and I think the biggest barrier we've got at the moment is very much around people's confidence to travel, and how much of an impact the vaccine will have on that. Obviously, if we have got a vaccine in place and people know that that's there, then that opens up the doors very easily. But one thing that we are seeing in the UK, and this is a gradual change in terms of people's view of the world, as it were, because it's constantly changing, as we all know, week by week, day by day, is that there is a softening of the views and people's understanding of the risks associated with COVID, and I think that as the world starts to open up and our own countries start to open up and people get more confident about going out and having experiences, whatever those experiences are, that will only help people then want to be comfortable and be comfortable in terms of traveling again. I think that's a key driver behind this.
Right, because it's one thing to have a corporate travel ban or borders being closed, but if you personally don't feel comfortable traveling.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, sorry, you carry on. No, I was going to say, I think that the point you make around the company's travel policies will be a determining factor as well. I think it's a good point that you make, but ultimately people make their own choices.
Right. Well, that's a great segue into our next question to Libby. Libby, seeing as we're talking about corporate travel bans, how will corporate travel policies impact your business events? Either for corporate meetings, exhibitions, or sponsorships at your conferences and trade shows?
I mean, it has a big impact. So like us corporately, we're on a travel ban. We're not supposed to be flying right now. As same with our supplier partners. We had a convention that was scheduled to be the end of March, and early mid-March, I started getting the, I can't travel, which is my income. If they there, there's really nothing to exhibit. So it has a big impact.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any indication as to when the corporate travel ban within your organization will be lifted?
No, not at all. I mean, truthfully, I think a lot of it has to do with expense control too.
Mm-hmm.
Thing, but it's also an expense control.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, let's bring it back to our Canadian partners and how we can help you in this journey moving forward. So, Roberta, if we could start with you, what support would you say, what do you need from our partners to bring your events back to Canada or to meet in Canada? And specifically, how can our hotels, our convention centers, our DMCs, airlines, AV organizations, all of our suppliers, what can they do to help guide you through this current environment?
Well, first of all, we, and not just because of the current environment, but we have always actively sought business partnerships that display flexibility, giving preference to cities that are willing to not only work with us and are expanding, ever expanding force majeure clauses, but those cities that have a broader strategic view towards their clients. In other words, cities that incentivize multiple year contracts or long-term support in business, revisit long signed contracts to adjust without penalty for current realities, and or offer contracts that incentivize participation at a convention center, not necessarily heads and beds. In terms of what the hotels and other partners within and for a city can bring is transparency, accessibility, a commitment to environmental sustainability, as well as anything that will save time and resources. But as I think Bo or Andrew had mentioned before, but through a DMO, dealing with the moving pieces within a city is difficult given our staff resources. And we're always extremely dependent on a strong DMO to funnel the needed information upon our request and through its website, as it saves an enormous amount of time for us. We come to Canada about every 4 years, and in one of the 3 major cities, and we have long relationships with most, and flexibility has been really key to our keep coming back to Canada.
Thanks, Roberta. And there's probably those relationships with the cities who are listening right now who know you personally as well. So, and Libby, from the U.S. corporate side, how can we and our Canadian partners assist you through this journey also?
Again, just being a partner, being flexible. We're coming to the table and understanding. We want to bring you business, but everything is so fluid and changing. And again, you have attendee concerns. Do they want to travel? Can they travel? Literally. So what we planned 2 years ago, what's reality today are very different. And so we're going to really see, the partnership level on both sides. How that works out.
And Andrew, would you have a different perspective looking from an international perspective?
Well, I think what Roberta and Libby have said, strikes true in terms of those being a trusted partner, giving people confidence doing business in Canada. I mean, I've run lots of events in Canada over the years, and my experience has always been a very positive one. And we would continue to bring events to Canada as well on that basis. So I think you've got a great record to build on. It's all about communication and trust. And giving people that flexibility, but also there may be ways of incentivizing the industry to come to Canada as well. I've seen some initiatives in other countries that have worked well and could work well for other parts of the world, particularly in Europe. I mean, Germany have started to reduce their VAT taxes on F&B, for example. And Spain look at VAT on business events. In fact, no VAT on business events as well. So those are things. There may be other ways that you can incentivize people to bring business, particularly from longer haul destinations, to get that movement and those events coming back to Canada. And driving some of the value that you're looking for in the future as well. So I think there's opportunities there. It is very much about the relationship and trust and the professionalism that you drive and deliver as well.
Thanks, Andrew. Thomas, a quick question. How can our partners market and promote their health and safety programs throughout your delegate journey?
Certainly it starts with us to really, and as was mentioned before, it's a real all destination effort that's not just piecemeal, I do this, but really pulling it together and as early as possible communicating not just what the current situation is, but keep us updated on what's happening because it might very much change our planning process, and we need to then communicate this on to our delegates and partners and so on.
So touching on that, Thomas, are you open to our Canadian partners to reach out to you about 2022 and beyond plans, or currently are your preferences for partners to connect only with immediate or booked business?
We are actually already confirmed for Montreal for 2023. And we look forward to that, and we've already been in touch with them and we know what's going on. So they've been fantastic in keeping us informed. We feel in very good hands.
Great. And Kate, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, for sure. We have at BCD, we're a pretty large agency based in the US, so we have an industry relations team, and we certainly do have some preferred partnerships that we're in ongoing conversations with almost weekly. But by all means, I mean, we have seen some events, some large events. I did mention it earlier. It was a 2,500 person event that moved from Orlando and is looking to move, is moving to Toronto. So it's great to see. I think that actually, being a Canadian working in a US company, it always amazes me the lack of information that sometimes US markets have about Canada by what Canadians are doing. I think that sometimes the US perhaps doesn't consider Canada because they're right next door, but what a tremendous opportunity there is to explore Canada and leverage Canada for all the right reasons. And, not to mention how we've managed the pandemic, but also just the exchange rate alone. Oftentimes when we talk about, with customers, hey, have you considered moving your event to Canada? Just the exchange rate alone helps get people thinking about it as a destination. So I think by all means, if there's properties, if there's hotels, I'm open to conversation by all means. Most of that does go through our IR department, though, I will say.
Thanks, Kate. And lastly, I just wanted to ask Libby the same question.
Again, Canada's always been a great partner, and I find it true the same thing. It's like a hidden gem. You kind of, until you start telling people about it, they're like, I didn't realize I could do all those things. So Canada's a partner. But yes, information is good. Any sort of incentive, to get the business, sharing that is good. That's starting to come out from a lot of different destinations and locations. Either aggressive, attrition, waiving, there's whatever's going to take away the risk.
Right.
Because you can remove and make it the barrier a little bit smaller to, jump the gun and be willing to, because we want to sign a contract just as much as you want one, but there has to be the understanding of, a give and a take, I guess.
Right. Thanks, Libby. So our final question, we're going to ask all of the panelists the same question for quick fire. If you could list your top 3 decision factors in a destination selection, and has this changed? So we'll start with you, Thomas.
All plays nicely into Canada. The professional reputation of the destination, number 1. Flexibility with contracting. Excuse me?
Yep.
Flexibility with contracting, but also in terms of venues. For example, if we now need more physical distancing, how flexible can venues be? And lastly, cost. And I don't think they have really changed very much, but these are the top 3.
Thanks, Thomas. And Libby, your top 3.
So the destination, either familiar, I call it cachet. So familiarity, or like the, especially on the incentive side, the desire for somebody to want to go there. Airlift was always very important. It's going to continue to be even more important as, we've gone through this process. Obviously, airlift has been cut very dramatically. So as it starts to come back online, are the destinations that we're looking at going to be in the forefront of that? Am I going to be able to get all my attendees there? And then cost.
Great. Thanks, Libby. And Andrew.
Yeah, the selection of destinations, C19 is definitely having an impact on the selection of destination moving forward, and it goes back to this that trust and that confidence of going to a particular destination. But the key drivers are similar to what Thomas was saying earlier, very much around professionalism. And having that safe pair of hands and knowing that you can trust the destination and what they're delivering, and what goes around the edges of that as well. Flexibility, important things in terms of contracts, etc., and the way that the business is done. And last but not least, it will be a very competitive world out there in the coming weeks and months. And I think, competitive pricing, commercial competitiveness is really important as well. But there's lots of ways you can add value. It doesn't just have to be about the price. It's about how you can deliver that as well. And that's another key driver.
Thanks, Andrew. And Bo?
Yeah, so I don't think our priorities have really changed at all post-COVID, but number one is ease of access. So it's availability of lift, direct flights. Number two would be marketability, and three would be cost, as others have said. In terms of what's new, I think in that second bullet of marketability, that safety and security is a key component.
Great. Thanks, Bo. And Roberta, your top three.
Okay, affordability of the convention center, the community itself, hotels, restaurant community, delegate appeal, of which I would include health and safety, walkability. We tend to lean towards cities that have a tight downtown core between the hotels and the convention center. But what I can see is that the delegate journey is becoming more and more important, which includes the environmental cost of air travel and a destination's willingness to help in reducing or offsetting that impact. And in addition, while health and safety has always been an important factor for us, it has become necessarily a more integral part of the delegate appeal of a city, given the risks of traveling globally in today's environment.
Thanks, Roberta. And Kate, your top three.
Sure. Yeah, I similar to what Bo said, I don't think our why has really changed. Still remains our North Star, but I would certainly say that the same things, the value, and the value, to Andrew's point, is not necessarily just in bottom line cost. It's that overall value proposition that a destination brings. I think it's, with incentive travel, I think there's certainly an opportunity with that uniqueness, that attendee journey, that attendee experience. And I think there's increased opportunity for Canada in that space, because I think Canada will offer some uniqueness there, especially being so close to home, and the fact that that's tied to airlift, which was always accessibility, was a big thing. So I would say kind of combine those would be top three.
Great, thanks, Kate. And Paula.
Yes, thank you. Well, security and medical conditions, I think, will be the first. We'll put eyes on what suppliers are offering to us. Second one will be budget. So as well, a client right now are saving cash flow. So we're putting as well, pretty important to have the cost on the proposals. And the third will be distance. I think that people don't want to move too far. As they mentioned, direct transfer will be select.
Right.
To have a proposal on a destination after COVID.
Great. Thanks, Paula. So I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you for all taking the time to talk with us. We do look forward to welcoming you and your events back to Canada when the time is right. Thank you all for such a fantastic discussion. And Chantal, I'll hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jen. And thanks to all our panelists for all your insights today during this session. And a few things in summary that I found are key takeaways for all of us as our partners, as well as our business events team. And I really looked at kind of three things that I heard coming through. The one being that planners are looking for clear, concise information with regards to the delegate journey and everything around it, from destinations, from the DMO partners who act as the conduit for their partners. And this could include curated venue health and safety measures, hotel safety protocols, transportation, airport to venue hotel adheres to new safety and health standards, as well as any health services available to delegates once they're in that destination. And I think that one became key, that kind of came through on several of the panelists' comments. The second that I had heard really was the flexibility, and the flexibility particularly on the cost is a key factor. Knowing that the social distancing and what that one may have in terms of that measure will increase costs. Costs for who? Costs for planners. So really trying to understand and finding that middle ground on negotiating with partners to really talk about who absorbs that cost and what is best to make things as easy as possible to bring those clients back up. I think the final one that I had heard is that corporate travel bans. You know, when we think about, you know, there's going to be restrictions on borders, but when we start to think about, you know, borders lifting, we also have to really consider that there's corporate travel bans that will affect our exhibitor registration as well as attendance. Which in turn affects organizations' bottom lines, and additionally, individual attendees' personal comfort as well on whether they can travel. So even when those bans get lifted again, will those individuals feel safe to travel? So those were kind of the three areas that I saw. So thanks Jen. Merci à nos experts pour leurs propos fort intéressants. En résumé, voici selon moi les principaux valeurs que j'ai pensé, les points à retenir. Premièrement, que les personnes prévoyant un voyage sont à la recherche des renseignements clairs et concis de la part des organismes de marketing de destination qui agissent en tant qu'intermédiaires pour leurs partenaires, que ce soit au sujet des mesures de santé et de sécurité mises en place sur les sites, des nouveaux protocoles de sécurité dans les hôtels ou des nouvelles normes en matière de santé et de sécurité à respecter lors du transport entre l'aéroport et les sites et les hôtels. Et il souhaite également en apprendre davantage au sujet des services de santé dont les délégués peuvent se prévaloir une fois arrivés à votre destination. La numéro 2, je pensais que c'était vraiment la flexibilité au chapitre des coûts est un facteur très clé. C'est les mesures en distanciation sociale engendront des coûts supplémentaires pour les personnes prévoyant un voyage. Donc, qui va absorber ces coûts-là? Et le dernier, le troisième, c'est vraiment l'interdiction de faire des voyages d'entreprise qui aura des répercussions sur les taux d'inscription et d'assiduité des exposants, ce qui influera sur le chiffre d'affaires des organisations. Elle aura également une incidence sur mesure dans laquelle les participants se sentiront à l'aise de voyager. Autrement dit, voudront-ils même voyager une fois que l'interdiction est levée? So when we kind of go through, I thank everyone for being part of this. We do have about 15 minutes, so there are some questions in the chat box that I will open up here. Just give me 2 seconds. I will leave the one for ourselves at the end, but would really like to really pull some up, and feel free, Jen, to pop in to help navigate the questions to whom, but to any of the panelists that want to answer, just unmute yourself and feel free to answer. They look at, you know, when we talked about, one of the panelists here had said, can you please dig in a little bit more into room blocks? And I guess from the association planners, what they're asking, the question being, will association planners change the way they book hotel rooms? So I don't know whether Tom or...
Tom, did you want to start?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think we've looked at this model actually over a long period of time. I think where it comes back to is, again, flexibility. And many destinations are very different. I think Canada is actually one of the ones that makes it a lot easier than other destinations, so that's a positive thing. But you know, I think we have to be very careful about this, because I think many organizations have been pretty badly burned in this situation. And you know, because of what's going on. So I think this is going to be definitely an area that will be looked into.
We're already seeing a shrinkage of the room block, and it doesn't mean that we're losing people at our meeting. They're in the city, whether they're using Airbnb or they think they can get a better deal going around us. But we are, especially outside of North America, we don't book more than 1,000 to 1,100 rooms on our peak, which is, you know, not a whole lot when you consider that we've got 600 to 7,500 people in a city. In North America, we'll book around 2,200, but that's a far cry from what we used to book. So
I would just say,
changing.
Yeah, and I would just say, so we're not an association company, but certainly for our really large events, you know, those 10,000 plus person events, we're seeing shrinkage too. And it's for some of the reasons, Roberta, that you just mentioned. Many of these are going through a managed hotel block, so people don't necessarily have that choice, but people are choosing either not to attend, and they're choosing to attend the hybrid virtual component of the event. that's now in discussion. And so, you know, as a event stakeholder conversation that we're having, we're starting with, for your events moving forward, are you considering a hybrid model to it? Are you including a virtual piece to it? And that's actually impacting numbers. So that's making us now revisit hotel blocks. And obviously for that size of event, when you're, you know, above 1,000, well, when you're above a couple of thousand, obviously you're looking at multiple hotels anyway. So we're definitely evaluating that for sure.
And that kind of goes back to our question, and how has the planning process changed? Because these are the questions now that you need to ask and adapt to moving forward. So, yeah. Chantal, is there more questions? I'm sure there's tons. Yeah.
Another one came in from one of our partners, and the question is right around site inspections and FAMs. So do you feel that site inspections and FAMs will need to evolve, and if so, how? And what do you need from a DMO or a hotel and venue partners going forward? Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
Offer a quick note on it. I think in the short term, we're seeing evolution and a lot of virtual site inspections happen. Not all of those are created equal. I think some people have a formula where they're really dialed in, you get a great sense of the venue. But I think that's short term. At the end of the day, you need to see the room, taste the food, experience the people, experience the destination. So absolutely, for the end of this year, the virtual site inspection is incredibly important, but I don't see that as a wave of the future.
Mm-hmm. Tom, did you want to answer?
Yeah, I think it's with so many of these things right now, we are reacting to the very situation. So everything goes in completely one direction. I think we're going to ultimately see a better balance of it, because I think a hybrid aspect, even for site inspections, always makes sense if you can go there and see things really. But then obviously combine that with a physical visit makes perfect sense. So I think we're just, you know, recalibrating.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, did you want to touch?
Yeah, just another point for people to consider around this as well, isn't it? It's a conversation. I was on another webinar the other day about this, and it's very much around the risk assessment, and also when you're doing these site inspections moving forward, as much as we have done health and safety and we've done risk assessments, the dynamics of those site inspections in the short term, hopefully it won't be for long, but in the short term, you know, the way that those site inspections are being undertaken and looking at that delegate journey and those touch points, you know, we're going to be looking at them differently than we have done previously for all the reasons we've talked about today, unfortunately. But it's something that you'd have to factor in, and it may impact on the way that those site inspections are undertaken as well.
Mm-hmm. And we're starting to hear from our partners that they're actually conducting virtual FAMs right now. I believe Quebec City just conducted, or last week or this week, they were conducting a virtual FAM as well. So anyone else like to touch on that, or we can move to the next question? Next question, Kate.
So another question is more towards the incentives. So one of our partners said they understand that meetings, you know, whether it becomes that they're moving virtual right now and maybe moving into a more hybrid moving forward, but is there much of a change that you see from the incentive side on different types of experiences that they'll be wanting to be taking into? So is there anything that you want to add that hasn't maybe been added about any type of different experiential incentive that you'd be looking at, and how that would then relate to Canada?
I can throw in a couple of thoughts. I would say sustainability has always been a big topic, and philanthropic CSR components of any incentive have certainly been a big part of a lot of the stuff that we're doing. I'm sure the case is with you too. So I think, you know, when we're doing proposals right now and we're talking with our customers right now, there is definitely a focus on local authentic experiences. I don't think that's new to anybody. But what are those tie-ins for sustainability? And I know for us as an agency partner, we're talking to our customers a lot about vetting through the supplier, you know, supply chain, what our supplier partners are actually doing from a sustainability and philanthropic perspective too. And that's actually now becoming more and more prevalent as part of our sourcing process. So just something to consider.
Good to hear. Andrew, did you want to add anything to that, or Bo?
I guess I'll add two quick comments. I think, you know, as it relates to incentives in the short term, we are seeing smaller group sizes or requests to handle that, even to individual incentives. From an activity perspective, in the same capacity, there's been a desire to outline activities that have social distancing capabilities. So golf versus packing a boat for a river cruise with 100 people in a tight confined area, right? So it's common sense, but that's the desire and the drive, is to have those activities that still allow for spacing.
Yeah, and in the UK, there's a lot of conversation, going back to Bo's point, smaller incentives are going to be part of our businesses moving forward in terms of the agencies and people network I'm working across in the UK. But also the potential of real high end here as well, making them very special, making it very exclusive. And I think, and that's to give people the confidence in terms of where they're going, and the fact that the smaller numbers give them a little bit more comfort as well. So I think there's a number of drivers behind that, but high end, smaller number incentive programs, I think, is something that's definitely coming out of the UK at the moment.
Okay, and with that said, just a kind of a second question, because there's been several questions coming through with regards to airlift. And when you're talking about smaller incentives, as an example, going to maybe more authentic, sustainable destinations in Canada, how has that impacted now with regards to airlift? Quite a few of you have been talking about direct flights. If you can't get a direct flight in and there is you've got to take a connection, is that still the end goal, is to get everyone to that place that matches the value system? And in that case, you will take the connection, or is that taking a back seat to that right now? I don't know if anyone wants to take a stab at that one.
Would you like to take a stab at that one? Tom?
Right.
Or Libby?
I mean, a unique destination is a unique destination. I guess it would just matter. It would just depend on how hard I don't know if a connection is a stopgap, but if you can only get 50 people in a day, and my incentive is 100 people, that's usually the problem.
Yeah.
I think for business events like ours, it's to a certain degree a convenience factor as well. So the shorter, the easier, the better. And particularly if there's something else that worries you, then you may do it in hybrid. You may just attend virtually.
From a European perspective, from the UK, I mean, what we see is direct flights when it's a longer haul destination is important, because often flights will connect into a hub in Europe and then on. So, if you're doing a flight from from London, for example, there's people that'll have flights down or journeys down from different parts of the UK into London. So what you don't want to be doing is having connections on the other end of that as well. So access does have it does determine the selection of the destination. Even on smaller groups as well, it's an important part of that we would put into our programs and the consideration.
Can I just say one thing about flights, though? It's always interesting to me, and this is when we have priced out some Canadian destinations. It's always interesting to me that we can get to Ireland, Spain, Croatia cheaper than we can get to Canada often, and it's even flying within Canada, it's very expensive. So I don't know what opportunities there are from an airline's perspective, and I know that there's a lot of ground to cover, but that often is a challenge, that just the pure cost. I would agree with Libby, the connection isn't necessarily the stopgap. That wouldn't be it. It would come down sometimes to the airlift, the total airlift, and then sometimes the cost. Sometimes the cost is really high.
Yeah, from Mexican market as well, we can see it's affordable to go to Canada. For example, we're comparing with America, so the cost is really competitive in Canada destinations, and as well the direct connections really good. And we can see, and I agree with all of you, that the smaller groups and incentives will be those we are getting first.
Thanks, everyone. Unfortunately, I know there's a few other questions in the chat box, but we've got 3 minutes left, and I just have to wrap up. So wanted to thank everybody, all the panelists, for taking the time to talk to us today. We look forward to welcoming you and your events back to Canada when the time is right, and we appreciate the time that you've taken with all our Canadian partners here today. And in terms of next steps, as mentioned earlier, the supporting report is now available on our website. It'll also be shared following the webinar for all of those who have participated. We will also be hosting more focus groups through the year based on our recovery signals that will identify when these follow-up discussions will be needed. But right now, in the meantime, if you have any questions regarding today, please reach out to us by email at research@destination.com. Et pour ce qui est des prochaines étapes, comme nous l'avons déjà mentionné, le rapport est déjà disponible sur notre site web et sera envoyé aux participants après le webinaire. Nous tiendrons d'autres groupes de réflexion durant l'année et nous nous baserons les signes de reprise pour déterminer quand il sera nécessaire de tenir des nouvelles discussions. Si vous avez des questions déjà sur le webinaire d'aujourd'hui, merci de nous avoir écrit par courriel à research@destinationcanada.com. Thank you so much to all the panelists. Thanks to Jen for the insightful discussion and for your time here today. Merci à tout le monde, les panélistes pour cette discussion fascinante et pour votre temps aujourd'hui. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day et bonne journée.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Merci, au revoir.